Yeah, so let's talk throughput. Throughput is really actually quite simple. It's just the actual number of work items finished for a given unit of time. If you're working in a team or in an organization that's using Scrum, you might be measuring throughput per sprint. So you might say for every 2 weeks, this is how many stories get completed or how many work items get completed. If you're working in more of a continuous flow model, you might be looking at measuring throughput daily. And sometimes that's not a whole number. It might be something like, for this team, we get 0.8 work items finished a day. So when we think about throughput, you'll notice we're not talking story points. This is not the same as velocity. We are talking just how many work items were completed. And you can measure throughput at all different levels of work items. So you probably have a throughput rate for your epics. You can have a throughput rate for your features. You can have a throughput rate for your user stories or team level tasks. So when we think about throughput, it's a measure here of how much work is getting done for a unit of time at all different levels of work items. And Julia, do you want to tell us where we can find more out about throughput rates?
Yeah, absolutely. So throughput is interesting because you can actually see it in a lot of places, but one of the best places to go is a throughput run chart. And you'll notice that this chart looks very similar to the WIP run chart. And when you're looking at like metrics like WIP and throughput, they're counts of things that happen in a particular period of time. So it's going to look very similar. So just like the WIP run chart was the count of items in progress for that day, this is the count of items that pass the finish line in a particular day or whatever unit of time. So all of the same things that you're looking for in that WIP run chart, what's our range? What's our variation? Is it trending up? Is it going down? All of these different patterns. Those are the same questions that you'll probably ask on any kind of chart that looks like this. And again, the answers aren't going to be here. You're going to have to go investigate the weirdness. I can see some things here, like occasionally I have 2 dots at 0 on a regular basis. That's the weekend for our teams because we don't work on the weekends. But occasionally things might happen. So we show all days, right? We work in global environments where, we might be spread across 5 countries, each with different holidays. And it gets hard to start excluding days because your work week is these 5 days and someone else's work week is those 5 days. And you have this holiday, but they have that holiday. It's just easier to include all of it and know that occasionally we're going to have patterns of inactivity. And so that's okay. So we are able to look at this like this, and this is interesting. It helps you see those patterns, but when it comes to forecasting, there's an even better way to use throughput. So if we'll move to the next slide, we have, when you want to forecast how long it'll take to get groups of work done, so like an epic full of stories, or even a story full of subtasks or things like that, you're able to look at the rate at which you finish work in a given period of time, and then you're able to look and see, okay, how many items are in this particular container? And then I can use something called a Monte Carlo simulation. So in Actionable Agile Analytics, we use Monte Carlo simulations. They're nothing proprietary. They are sort of the industry standard way to forecast in uncertainty. And that's why your investment portfolios will give you an idea of what's the conservative return, what's the aggressive return, what's the expected return. And they're using Monte Carlo simulations because lots of stuff can happen and they need to give you an idea of what the likely outcomes are. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're looking at all of those ups and downs and all the different possibilities of delivery you can have over time. And we're running thousands and thousands of simulations to tell you, when will you be able to get this amount of items done? And for the Monte Carlo when, we show you a calendar. And so we're able to see that number of items that you want to finish. What's the likelihood that you'll finish those on any given day? And so you can look exactly at that day and see if it's a good likelihood or a bad likelihood. And then you can have great discussions about that, right? Again, it's not going to tell you how to make it better, but then you can go and say, well, if historically, if we think of our data as the voice of our process, it's really what you've been able to do in the face of all the stuff that happens to you. That's why I firmly believe your data is the best model you can use for forecasting what you can do, because it's what's being generated as you experience all of your conditions. So what we're saying is we've been able, this is what we can do based on how we've performed so far. If we want something else to happen, what are we going to do differently to try to get a different outcome in the future? If we don't do anything differently, we shouldn't expect a different outcome, right? So when we're forecasting groups of items, we have these two questions. If you're in project management, you're probably familiar with the fixed date and fixed scope, right? So the Monte Carlo win is a fixed scope. So we know about this amount of work right now. When are we likely to get it done? But we use throughput as well for answering the fixed date question. Okay, so you've got a release and it's going to marketing. Marketing is going to push this out. You can't move it, right? Like I used to work at NBA.com and the draft, I'm sorry, if I wasn't ready, it wasn't going to move, right? So we had to see when we were going to get that amount of, how much work we could get done by that date. So we're able to use your throughput as well and run thousands of simulations to give you an idea of how likely you are to get different amounts of work done. And then it's up to you to make sure those items are the most important ones. But throughput is a very important flow metric for forecasting. Now, as we talk about these other flow metrics that we're going to cover soon, getting better at those will make you like these answers better because it's all sort of interconnected. But throughput is definitely a way to go. And this is like the flow world's version of how we're forecasting for groups of items. In the Kanban guide and whatnot, we are using throughput instead of velocity. And I'll just cover really quickly is the reason that we do that is simply because what we're trying to forecast is when you'll get work items done. Throughput is directly a measure of work items and the rate at which they're done. I don't need to back out into a proxy of work to, that's a step farther away. So that's one of the reasons why we use that. We don't bash on other things. They're just for different purposes. This is a direct match of what we're trying to forecast. So we match the data to the what and use as close of a match as possible. That's why we use throughput for forecasting how much work we can get done, because it's the measure of work.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Julia, I think one of the things I see for a lot of organizations that are changing process or adopting new processes, there's usually this period of time where they're trying to re-baseline everything, right? Well, we have new measures and now we have a new team, or we have to figure out a new velocity for this part of our business. But the nice part about throughput is you have all this data already. We can already go and pull all your throughput data, and it's going to account for all that stuff that's hard to account for when we estimate, right? Things in the process where work gets stuck, delays because we have handoffs between teams. We're not trying to give you a bad estimate, but a lot of times when we're estimating work, it's hard to account for those things that we can't see. That's already reflected in your throughput data. So you're already starting with a more realistic set of data for your forecast than, like you said, Julia, with some of the other methods that we might be using to try to get better at estimating. Yeah. So Rita, let's talk about how you use this with your team.
And everybody thinks that they can estimate better than forecasters when something will be done. And this is usually what what people, especially I guess in delivery, meets is like, no, this will be just like 2 weeks. We'll be done. No worries about it. I'm like, well, shall we reflect on our data and actually see what we have? Because data suggests something different. And unfortunately, most of those times, forecasts were right, and they were actually falling into the place, and we were very wishful that we would finish something earlier, but it would not every single time it would happen. Reflecting with the team is extremely important. Exactly, the spikes. Ooh, what happened there? Did we just suddenly bashed all the items Friday night, all going home and everything is closed? Was it different type of work? where they're, something easier, not a risky code base, maybe, or did we actually pair? Did we, there could be so many things why that one particular spike happened. And then we go back into like zeros, ones, and twos, right? And it's like, okay, so this was something a bit different. We need to sort of acknowledge that. This is real data from my team. So you see the very long zero line. That's Christmas, because everybody likes a time off. So when we actually forecast and we come in January and someone asks, well, when something will be done, we need to then be very creative and be like, okay, let me look at last year when something was very similar that we are about to work on, that I can take data from and forecast on that. So watching out for zeros and spikes is extremely important, because when you're forecasting, it does take into consideration the amount you select. That's going to look how many items you actually delivered, and the cycle time. So what the cycle time looks like for that. So if you're trying to forecast for February based on holiday season, it's not going to work. It's not going to be very correct forecasts. And the type of work was really important for us, because some teams are very reactive. They have very quick tickets, small bug fixes. They are going really, really quickly. If you are thinking about the bigger project and something, goal related, that's a different story. So forecasting, this saved our lives basically at SpectraX. When I joined SpectraX in 2022, I was told we have this very important feature. It needs to go out as soon as possible. That's one thing, biggest focus. Everybody was aware of that. The closer we got to like sort of finishing, there popped up a wishful date in mind. We should really deliver this by that date. It happens. It's normal. And that's where we started to look, okay, so if we want to deliver by this date and we still have that many items left, it very quickly showed we are not going to make it. That's just not going to be possible. Starting these conversations with stakeholders, with the wider business, was extremely useful, because we provided something that we could work on together. And we said, if we want to deliver this on time, either we need to cut the scope, or we need to look for other teams who could support us and come in and share the load. And exactly that's what we did. We had quite a good amount of people in other teams who knew the domain, the knowledge and everything, and they were picking up some of our work. We delivered on time as per deadline, and it was achieved. But it wouldn't be possible if we believed in our estimates, because we always think we can finish things sooner, but then somebody comes in, quick 5 minutes thing, can you just like fix this thing for me? And you're like, oh, I just done 20 quick fixes, but that means you're not working on the actual things that you need to work on. So we introduced as well a little bit of 20 minutes before retro, we look at our data. We actually reflect on it, how the past 4 weeks went, what's happening, any surprises, what do you think? And extremely important is, there isn't right amount of data to say that each team needs to look at that long, like, is it 8 weeks, is it 12 weeks, is it last 10 data points? The most important is to think about your experience, and like, if you have team days, if you are traveling on a regular basis, if you are like, oh, this is our holiday season because that's when we are all off and stuff. These are your patterns that then you can think about when you are starting to think about, oh, I need to forecast. Like, okay, if I have enough to suggest that all these patterns will be included, that's brilliant, because you already have historical data into your, embedded into your future. So yeah, Throughput was absolutely savior for us.
I love it.